I was falsely accused of cheating on an exam by Rowena. And yet, on my birthday, my childhood friend brought her over to make peace with me. We were classmates once. There's no need to hold such a grudge. Indeed, there was no need. So I threw away his birthday gift, destroyed everything related to him, and completely withdrew from his world. I had planned for us never to cross paths again. Yet, at a business banquet years later, he spotted me in the crowd at a glance. In front of everyone, the once proud golden boy's eyes turned red. Is it fun? Hiding from me for a full 7 years. Chapter 1. During recess. The entrance to our classroom was packed with students, all craning their necks to look inside. In just one break, the rumor that Rowena from class 3 had accused a classmate of cheating had spread throughout the entire school. Rowena had spent the entire morning crying, her eyes swollen from tears as she lay on her desk. A crowd had gathered around her, offering comfort while sneaking glances in my direction. She's the class president. Maybe she misjudged the situation while trying to maintain order. People make mistakes. It's just a misunderstanding, not something unforgivable, right? The moment someone said that, several others nodded in agreement, their gazes shifting toward me. They were all waiting for me to step forward and console Rowena. As I met their expectant stares, my throat tightened. That familiar sense of isolation washed over me once again. Our school sorted students into classes based on academic performance. Class 3, the top-ranked class of the entire grade, was one I had fought tooth and nail to get into. Rowena had always been well-liked, gentle, warm-hearted, the epitome of an innocent sweetheart, the kind that everyone adored. On the surface, the class acted like a big, united family, but when real trouble arose, not a single person stood up for an outsider like me. I stiffened my neck, refusing to back down. Rowena owes me an apology. They were about to argue when Rowena suddenly lifted her head to look at me. Her face was streaked with tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. I know I made a mistake, but I really didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Is that enough, Sophia? She looked as if she had suffered an unbearable grievance. Before I could respond, she abruptly got up and ran out of the classroom. Then, moments later, startled gasps erupted from outside. My heart pounded as I hurried after her, only to see Rowena surrounded by a crowd in the hallway. She was sitting on the floor, her knees scraped and bleeding, her head lowered as she sobbed soundlessly. The murmurs of the onlookers filled my ears. Her parents just had a car accident, and she's already in an unstable emotional state. Does she really need to be pushed this hard? Seriously, is an apology really that big of a deal to her? A space had cleared around me. I stood there, frozen in place, at a complete loss. Then, when I finally looked up, my eyes met Theodore's. He had just stepped out of the office. Theodore had always had striking eyes, cold and distant when looking at others. But whenever he looked at me, there was always a trace of warmth. But right now, in those same eyes, I saw something else. Undeniable disappointment. In that instant, I understood Theodore was blaming me too. Chapter 2. Rowena, overwhelmed with emotions, missed a step on the staircase. Theodore took the initiative to carry her to the infirmary. As she lay on his back, her swollen eyes met mine, brimming with something unmistakable, triumph. Yes, it was triumph. In that instant, I felt exposed. Rowena had seen through me. She knew about the feelings I had never dared to voice for Theodore. And in that moment, I became certain her accusation wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. After returning from the infirmary, Theodore finally came to find me. The evening breeze tousled my hair as he leaned against the railing, lowering his gaze to me. Does one sentence really matter that much to you? His voice was calm, the same as always, but I noticed it. He, too, was blaming me, just like everyone else. A lump formed in my throat, rendering me speechless. After a long pause, I lifted my head to look at him. I don't understand. Why is it that just because she cried, suddenly I'm the one in the wrong? Theodore looked at me, stunned for a second. Maybe my effort to hold back tears looked ridiculous, because the tension in his expression eased. You didn't do anything wrong, he finally said, shifting his gaze away. I just think there's no need to make such a big deal out of it. The sharp ring of the school bell cut through the air, pushing my heartbeat into a relentless rhythm. I stood there, staring at Theodore, an inexplicable bitterness rising within me. Was it really just about avoiding an ugly scene? Or was there something more? By the time school ended, Theodore was nowhere to be found. Rowena's seat was empty too. Someone passed on a message. Theodore had something to take care of and told me to head home on my own. Oh, I responded softly, unsure of how to feel. On the way home, groups of students rode together, their laughter echoing in the evening air. I kept my head down, pedaling my bike, but for some reason, memories kept resurfacing. Back in the old neighborhood, Theodore's name carried weight. Everyone knew that despite his aloof demeanor, he was fiercely protective. No matter who I argued with, Theodore would always be the first to stand up for me, without question. I had grown up without parents, raised by my grandmother in that old neighborhood. I used to trail behind Theodore, calling him big brother all the time. But as we got older, I started to resent that word. I began calling him by his full name instead. Theodore would sling my backpack over his shoulder, glancing at me lazily. "So, your wings have hardened now? Calling me by my name directly?" It was as if he had seen right through me. I raised my voice defiantly. "Big brother? You're only a few days older than me." Like I was deliberately challenging him, I yelled, "Theodore! Theodore! Theodore!" I had expected him to rough me up like he always did, but he didn't. Instead, he just stood there, watching me for a long moment before finally sighing. "Fine, fine, I give up." Then, in a low murmur, he added, "Good." I never really liked that word anyway. By the time I snapped back to reality, the sky had turned completely dark. The school wasn't far from home, but in that short distance, I had turned back to check 108 times. Yet on that dimly lit road, the familiar figure I was looking for never appeared. Chapter 3. The next morning, Theodore waited for me as usual to walk to school together. It seemed like nothing had changed. But on the way, I couldn't hold back. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Why did you come home so late yesterday?" Theodore brushed it off lightly. "Got held up with something." He didn't explain further, but I found out soon enough, because the moment I stepped into the classroom, I saw Rowena look up at Theodore with a bright smile. "Morning, Theodore." "Oh, right, thanks for walking me home yesterday." I froze. Slowly, I lifted my head to look at her. She had a beautiful smile, but I had never thought a smile could be this blinding. Before I transferred into class 3, I had already heard about it. Rowena and Theodore were close. I wanted to pretend it didn't matter, but how could it not? It mattered. It mattered so damn much. So this was what Theodore had been doing last night, walking Rowena home. I pressed my lips together, my nose suddenly stinging. For the entire day, I didn't say a word to Theodore. During a break, Rowena suddenly came over and placed a thermos of hot water on my desk. Before I could react, a loud crash rang out. Rowena's sharp scream pierced through the silence. Everyone turned to look. For a moment, the classroom fell into an eerie stillness. Rowena's face turned red as she stared at the shattered thermos on the ground in disbelief. Her voice was choked. "I just wanted to apologize for the other day." The thermos had broken into pieces, and scalding water splashed onto my ankle, leaving a glaring red mark. The more Rowena insisted that she simply lost her grip, the more eyes landed on me, and I knew exactly what those looks meant. I looked at Rowena, and in that moment, I understood. The same tactic, again. I hated this. I hated being falsely accused more than anything. Before Rowena could squeeze out another tear, I grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the teacher's office. "Enough. I didn't even touch the thermos. Let's go check the surveillance footage." Rowena froze for a second, her face instantly turning pale. She shook her head, resisting. The commotion escalated. Then, just as I took another step, someone blocked my way. "That's enough." I stiffened. Slowly, I looked up, straight into Theodore's face. It felt like being drenched in ice water. Cold, completely and utterly cold. He hadn't spoken to me all day, but the first words he said were in Rowena's defense. I knew exactly why Rowena was doing all of this. It was because of Theodore. He looked down at me, his expression somewhere between impatience and helplessness. "Stop making a scene. Class is about to start." That indifferent tone. That same casual dismissal, again. All the frustration that had been building inside me since last night surged up uncontrollably. My eyes burned red as I shoved Theodore hard. Tears streamed down my face before I could stop them. "Theodore, you're such a goddamn asshole. Why the hell should I have to keep putting up with Rowena's lies? Are you going to say it's not a big deal again? Maybe to you, it doesn't matter, but to me, it does." My sudden outburst caught Theodore off guard. He stared at me, completely dumbfounded, as if he hadn't expected me to react this way. For a long moment, his Adam's apple bobbed. Then, his voice came out hoarse. "That's not what I meant." Chapter 4. I insisted on checking the surveillance footage. Rowena clutched my wrist. "It was my own mistake. Let's not trouble the teacher over something so small." Anyone with half a brain could tell I wasn't the problem here. Many of the people who had defended Rowena last time remained silent. I wiped my tears and sat back down, feeling utterly humiliated. Theodore pressed a tissue into my hand. His gaze lowered as he murmured, "Sophia, that's not what I meant." I ignored him. For the next few days, Theodore hovered around me. We rarely fought. But that afternoon, when school ended, I turned and walked away without a word. Theodore must have finally had enough because he suddenly grabbed my sleeve. A cold sensation brushed my wrist, a delicate bracelet. It was the one I had lingered on while browsing online. Too expensive for me to dare looking a third time, even for someone like Theodore, who came from wealth. It wasn't something he could have bought on a whim. I stood frozen, watching as Theodore bent slightly to meet my eyes. "Please, don't stay mad at me, okay?" Without thinking, I reached to take it off and return it. Theodore stopped me. "I was planning to give it to you anyway. It's just a little early for your birthday." I kept my face taut. But somehow, the anger inside me had mostly faded. When I got home, I scolded myself for being too soft. Just as I finished berating myself, my phone rang. It was my aunt. She asked if I had thought it over. When would I transfer schools and move in with her? I stared at the bracelet on my wrist and whispered, "I want to stay a little longer." After my grandmother passed, the only reason I had left to stay here was Theodore. In the following days, Theodore never brought up Rowena in front of me again. I couldn't forgive her. I thought we had finally cut ties with Rowena for good. But on my birthday, I heard something. That over the past few days, Theodore had been going out with Rowena after school, shopping, taking walks. My heart sank. A deep, resounding thunderclap echoed in the sky. On my birthday, it rained heavily. Theodore was supposed to pick up my birthday cake, but at the last minute, he told me he was busy and asked me to get it instead. I wanted to ask him why over the phone, but he hung up too quickly. I reassured myself it was fine. I could just ask when I saw him. But the moment I stepped out of the bakery, I realized I was in trouble. The rain had gotten even worse, and my bike had broken down. The gathering wasn't too far from where I was, holding an umbrella in one hand and the cake in the other. I walked through the downpour, but I still got soaked. Theodore had never, in all the years we knew each other, made me pick up my own birthday cake. Not on my birthday. He must have had something more important to do. I kept telling myself that as I reached the door, but just before I pushed it open, I heard a voice. Rowena's voice. I froze. Her voice was light and sweet, carrying effortlessly through the entrance. "Thank you, Theodore. You even came to pick me up in this rain." The door wasn't fully closed. I stood still for a second, my body going numb. Then I looked up, inside. Everyone was already there, even people I didn't know. And in the crowd, I saw the one person I least wanted to see. It wasn't my imagination. Rowena was really here. Someone noticed me and called out my name. Instantly, all eyes turned to me. In that moment, my miserable state was laid bare for everyone to see. A strange silence fell over the room. Rowena turned toward me as well. She stood beside Theodore, clean and composed, a perfect contrast to my drenched, disheveled self. Water dripped from my sleeves. I stood there, clutching the cake, like a pathetic joke. I had never felt so humiliated. I was freezing, Lifting my gaze to Theodore, my voice trembled. Why is Rowena here? Theodore hadn't expected me to arrive like this. His face changed immediately. I could feel the tears threatening to spill. Just one blink and they would fall. I tilted my head back slightly, trying to hold them in, and repeated, "Why is Rowena here? You've been with her all this time, haven't you? Did you go pick her up today too?" Rowena had arrived looking pristine. Meanwhile, on my own birthday, I was standing here like a drowned rat, reduced to everyone's entertainment. Theodore knew how much I hated Rowena. I had told him over and over I never wanted to have anything to do with her again. So why, of all days, did he bring her here? Why, of all moments, did he do this when I was at my lowest? Theodore stood frozen, his Adam's apple bobbing. "She wanted to apologize to you properly today," he explained hesitantly. "She invited a lot of people to witness it and even prepared a gift. So I thought." He suddenly grabbed my wrist tightly. "I just wanted to clear up the misunderstanding. Rowena is actually a good person. There's no need." Again. That phrase. Again. I looked at Theodore and slowly pried his fingers off my wrist. Then I took off the bracelet and handed it back to him. This time, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. Sometimes, something you've held onto for so long just loses all meaning in an instant. I left that day without telling Theodore. It was just another ordinary afternoon, and that was the moment Theodore and I came to an end. Chapter 5. My aunt handled my transfer paperwork. She told me that when my name was mentioned, a boy suddenly bolted out of his classroom in the middle of a lesson. Over and over, he asked where I had gone. My aunt asked me, "Was he a close friend of yours?" I shook my head and whispered, "Not anymore." She never told Theodore, and Theodore would never find me. "Sophia, how are you so calm? Aren't you nervous? The boss said tonight's banquet will be full of big names." Nicole's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. The grand banquet hall before me was dazzling with lights and extravagance. 7 years had passed since I transferred schools. After leaving, I had no more distractions. I threw myself into my studies, aced the college entrance exam, and outperformed my expectations. After graduating, I smoothly entered this company. I blinked back to reality, dazed for a second. Relax. People like us are invisible here. Invisible? You climb to a position in 3 years that takes most people a decade. Just as she finished speaking, a commotion erupted at the front of the hall. Among the murmurs, I caught faint mentions of Sue CEO. Nicole swallowed. Sue CEO? He's one of the rising stars in business, filthy rich from birth. But his own ventures are just as successful. I can't believe he's here. I froze. A thought struck me. I lifted my head. In the center of the crowd stood a tall figure, surrounded by people. The perfectly tailored suit he wore screamed luxury. That profile, a wave of familiarity crashed over me. Instinctively, I turned to leave. "Sophia!" A voice shattered all my illusions of escaping unnoticed. People were still vying for his attention, but his eyes cut through the crowd, locking onto me. Under countless stares, he stepped toward me, one deliberate step at a time. "Did you have fun?" Theodore Sue's voice was low and strained. His teeth clenched, hiding from me for 7 whole years. The hall fell silent. Every gaze in the room landed on me, assessing, whispering, trying to piece together how someone like me could be connected to him. I had no choice but to turn back and meet his eyes. He had changed, and yet, he hadn't. Gone was the youthful boy from 7 years ago. Years of navigating the real world had hardened him, wrapping him in an untouchable air of authority. Now, Theodore was someone people would line up to impress. I took a step back, putting distance between us. I lifted my eyes to him, watching him in silence. After all this time, I had nothing to say. Maybe it was the sharpness of my retreat. Theodore suddenly tensed. His jaw tightened, his gaze darkening. "You're still trying to avoid me?" From nearby, my boss stood watching, his eyes blinking like a camera lens, his silent signals unmistakable. Over the years, I had learned how to navigate these circles. Saying the right words at the right time was easy, but I had no interest in playing that game with Theodore. Instead, I asked flatly, "Who do you think you are that I would go out of my way to avoid you?" A single sentence sent shockwaves through the room. Faces shifted, eyes darting uncomfortably. Even Theodore's complexion paled slightly. "What did you say?" His voice was lower now, a mix of frustration and disbelief. He let out a hollow laugh and stepped closer, his anger barely restrained. "Sophia, do you need me to remind you?" Remind me of what? How he had chosen Rowena every single time. How he had left me standing in the rain on my birthday. Humiliated? The bitterness buried deep in my chest resurfaced. I pushed down the emotion, letting out a cold chuckle of my own. I tilted my head slightly, meeting his gaze head-on, and with genuine curiosity, I asked, "Theodore," my lips curled into a faint, indifferent smile, "who the hell do you think you are?" Chapter 6. Theodore must have gotten used to everything going his way over the years, held up too high by the people around him. His brows furrowed, and the hostility in his eyes was unmistakable. He stared at me with a gaze sharp enough to cut. But when he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Say that again?" The air froze. My boss seized the moment to step in between us, subtly pushing me out of the scene. The cold night breeze outside helped clear my head. I hadn't expected Theodore to still have the power to rile me up after all these years. Nicole hurried after me, pressing a cold water bottle into my hands. God, Sue CEO looked terrifying just now. "How do you know him?" The chilled water slid down my throat. I let out a tired sigh. "Let's just leave it at that for tonight. I'm heading home. Tell the boss for me." I had just reached the parking lot when a message from Nicole popped up. "You left. And that CEO stormed out right after. Don't tell me he's coming after you?" My fingers stiffened over my phone. Behind me, in the quiet of the parking lot, I could hear footsteps approaching. Theodore had chased after me. He had run, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He stared at me for a long moment before letting out a dry laugh. "So, you were going to leave without even saying goodbye again?" I remained silent, but something about my calm expression seemed to set him off. His smirk twisted, his voice edged with frustration. "What? 7 years of hiding, and you have nothing to say to me?" I corrected him. "I wasn't hiding. Then why did you leave without a word? Why did you transfer without telling me? If I hadn't come looking for you, would you have just disappeared from my life forever?" I leaned against my car, letting out a soft chuckle. Who even remembers something so ancient? That sentence seemed to strike a nerve. Theodore's gaze darkened, and in an instant, his eyes reddened. "Forget? Sophia, how dare you forget?" His words landed like a heavy blow, reverberating through the 17-year-old version of me that still lingered somewhere deep inside. I let out a sharp, mirthless laugh. My gaze locked onto his. "And why the hell should I remember?" I took a step closer, looking him dead in the eye. "Theodore, who the hell do you think you are? Why should I hold on to the memory of that humiliating, gut-wrenching night?" Theodore's face turned pale. His voice was strained, as if he were holding something back. "I don't care who I am," he muttered, "but I won't let you forget." I was done with this conversation. I turned to leave, but Theodore blocked my way. I had thought I had mastered my emotions by now, but seeing his entitled, self-righteous expression made my temper snap. I swung my hand. A sharp slap landed against his cheek. Theodore barely flinched. His face turned slightly to the side, but he didn't look like he felt any pain. Instead, he spoke softly. "Do you have any idea how long I looked for you? Do you have any idea how happy I was to see you today?" Before he could say anything more, a loud crash shattered the silence of the parking lot. I turned in the direction of the sound, and saw Rowena standing not far away, frozen in place. Something had fallen from her hands and smashed on the ground. She had been holding Theodore's coat. For the past several years, Rowena had never left Theodore's side. They attended the same university. After graduation, Rowena had joined Theodore's company. This time, Theodore hadn't brought her along, she had come on her own, planning to surprise him. Her eyes were locked onto Theodore. She looked like she wanted to cry but was forcing herself to hold it in. For a second, she overlapped perfectly with the Rowena from years ago. I turned away, looking back at Theodore with a laugh. The ridicule in my voice was unmistakable. Theodore's face turned completely white. Rowena rushed forward, her expression a mix of panic and resentment. Yet, despite everything, she still forced a smile as she greeted me. "It's been a long time, Sophia." She tilted her head, her voice syrupy sweet. "You left so suddenly back then. I never even got the chance to properly apologize." As she spoke, she naturally slipped her arm around Theodore's, a declaration of ownership. Just like before, she hadn't changed at all. But before I could say anything, Theodore abruptly pulled his arm away. He turned to Rowena, his voice eerily calm. "Rowena, have I or have I not told you that if you want to keep your job, you should stop running your mouth?" A single sentence drained all the color from Rowena's face. Yet, she still reached for his sleeve, desperation lacing her voice. "Theodore, are you still mad about what happened before? I promise I won't do it again. Let's not fight, okay? Let's talk about this later. Just the two of us." She was terrified of what Theodore might say in front of me, but Theodore took a step back, widening the distance between them. He looked at me, his expression unreadable, and said quietly, "There was an accident back then. Rowena saved my family. That's why my mother arranged for her to work at my company." Stop talking. Theodore! Rowena suddenly lunged forward, cutting him off. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she clung to him. "Don't do this. Let's just go back, okay?" But Theodore ignored her, and, as if she wasn't even there, he finished the sentence. "I have never had anything to do with Rowena." Chapter 7. Theodore's explanation and Rowena's sobs crashed into my mind at the same time. The chaotic scene of our so-called reunion gave me a headache. They were saying a lot of things, but I wasn't really listening. I only remembered that, in the end, when my head hurt so much I just wanted to leave, Theodore grabbed my wrist. His grip was tight. He said that all these years, he had never once forgotten me. Then he asked, what could he do for me to forgive him? It was funny, really. Back then, he hadn't cared at all. So why, after 7 years, was he suddenly acting like he was full of regret and devotion? I didn't understand, and I didn't want to. I pried his fingers off me and mouthed 3 words. "Stop pretending." Then, without looking back, I got into my car and drove away. I had no intention of having anything to do with them ever again. But the next morning, the company group chat was blowing up. Holy crap! Whose black Bentley is parked outside? That license plate, it's all 6s. Aw. I saw the owner. He's so handsome, but his presence is intimidating as hell. I didn't dare look too long. The last time the chat was this lively was when a certain rich lady caught her husband cheating and slapped the mistress in the lobby. I shot upright in bed, all traces of sleep gone, staring at my screen. A single name was already forming in my mind. By the time I arrived at work, the Bentley was still there, brazenly parked outside the company. A small crowd had gathered nearby, whispering and watching. The owner of the car, however, seemed completely unbothered by the attention. He leaned against the vehicle, head lowered, lost in thought. I recognized that sharp side profile instantly. Theodore. Almost like he sensed me, Theodore lifted his head, his sharp gaze locking onto mine. There was no expression on his face, but I knew this look. He wasn't going to back down. He was angry that I had left without a word last night. So now, he had come to block my way. "Can we talk?" he asked. "What is there to talk about?" I found the situation amusing. Do we even have anything left to say to each other? "There's a lot." Theodore's eyes didn't waver. "There are so many things I've wanted to tell you all these years. And what if I don't want to listen?" Theodore was silent for 2 seconds before calmly stating, "You know I'm a patient man. Suit yourself." I turned away and walked into the company without another glance. Theodore Sue didn't leave. From my office window, I could see Nicole and Lucas, the new male intern, sneaking glances downstairs. Is that really Sue CEO? Is he insane? It's raining, and he's still standing there. Lucas leaned in, gossiping eagerly. Did he do something to piss Sophia off and is now pulling the whole tragic, devoted man act? Nicole sipped her coffee. "And you think you know everything?" Lucas nodded confidently. This is emotional manipulation. Plain and simple. Honestly, men are trash. Nicole raised an eyebrow. Aren't you a man? How could I be? Lucas gasped dramatically. I would never make Sophia mad. I'd only care for her feelings. I glanced outside. Raindrops drizzled against the window. Autumn rain was especially cold. Theodore stood there, holding an umbrella, staring up at the building. Even from this distance, I could imagine his expression. Cool, distant, stubborn. It was the same expression he always had after making me angry, when he would try to coax me into laughing again. Once Theodore decided on something, few people could stop him, and after all these years, he had only become even more relentless. I turned away and said nothing. By nightfall, the office had emptied out. After working late, I glanced outside. The idiot was still there. I shut down my computer and quietly slipped out the back in trance. That night, Nicole started a group chat with Lucas, determined to dig out my history with Theodore. I was forced into a long, pointless conversation. By the time I was brushing my teeth, the chat had exploded with 999 plus unread messages, all of them filled with Lucas and Nicole's sarcastic concern for Theodore. Before bed, Lucas sent me a private message. Sophia, want me to teach that guy a lesson for you? Lucas had a habit of talking big, so I didn't take him seriously. I just told him to go to bed early. The next day, Theodore was still there. Clearly, he had decided to be a shameless pest. I barely spared him a glance before slipping into the company through the back again. But just as I settled in, a sudden commotion erupted inside the office. Even my boss was alarmed. Nicole returned from the scene with a deeply complicated expression. Chapter 8. Theodore. That bastard. Something felt off. I frowned. What did he do now? Nicole hesitated before answering. I think he wants to add you on WeChat. Just ignore it. I did, she assured me, then pointed downstairs. But plenty of people are more than happy to give it to him. I narrowed my eyes. Nicole sighed and finally admitted. He's offering 100,000 yuan for your WeChat contact. Before I could react, my phone vibrated. A new message popped up from a colleague in another department. I'm so sorry, Sophia. Yeah, but the offer was too good. Kneeling. GIF. Another vibration. A new friend request. I'm Theodore. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. Before I could even digest this, another round of gasps echoed through the office. The company had never seen this much drama in years. Yet in just a few days, the shocks kept coming. A flashy sports car had just pulled up aggressively in front of Theodore's Bentley. The two vehicles were parked so close they were practically touching. Curiosity spread like wildfire. People crowded near the windows, eager to witness the latest spectacle. Who is that? No idea. Wait, they're getting out. Hang on, why does he look kind of familiar? Isn't that the rich kid intern working under Sophia Jia? My eyelid twitched. I looked closely. Sure enough, it was Lucas. Lucas stepped out of his car, removed his sunglasses, and gave Theodore a once-over before letting out a mocking laugh. Then, with a deliberate smirk, he flipped Theodore off. He said something I couldn't hear, but judging by Theodore's reaction, it wasn't anything pleasant. A bad feeling surged through me. I grabbed my phone and ran downstairs. By the time I got there, they were already fighting. I knew Theodore. He was not someone with a mild temper. Having been spoiled and respected all these years, there was no way he would tolerate some college intern provoking him in front of everyone. Lucas had a split lip and a forming bruise, but he simply wiped his mouth and looked at me with a deceptively sweet tone. Sophia Jia, don't be mad. It's not a big deal, even if he threw the first punch. I hit him back. Lucas was new to the company and usually walked around with a smug, arrogant grin. I knew he had done this for me, but I hadn't expected him to get beaten up for it. An overwhelming frustration at Theodore surged within me. I turned to him, my voice cold. Are you done yet? Even if Lucas said something, does that justify you throwing the first punch? Theodore, who had been silent, slowly lifted his gaze to me. I had never seen him look like this before, disheveled. His injuries weren't any better than Lucas's, in fact. They seemed even worse, but he didn't care about them. He only stared at me, his face pale, his eyes full of disbelief. You think I started this fight? Lucas let out a small, deliberate hiss beside me. Sophia, yeah. Don't be mad. It's just a scratch. It'll heal in a few days. It doesn't hurt. Let's go back inside. As I turned, Theodore suddenly grabbed my wrist. His fingers were ice cold. His smile was full of sorrow. So you won't even ask me? His voice was hoarse. You're just going to take his word for it and assume I threw the first punch? I yanked my hand away. If you want to talk, fine. We'll talk after work. Lucas turned his head and flashed Theodore a triumphant grin. Chapter 9. Theodore waited until the very end of the workday. He stood there the entire time, his face still bruised, refusing to tend to it. He just waited. When I stepped out of the company with Lucas, Theodore immediately approached. But before he could say a word, Lucas let out a deliberately pitiful hiss. He stretched out his hand toward me. Sophia, yeah. My hand hurts. I don't think I can drive. Theodore's expression twitched. Then, as if realizing something, he stepped forward. His eyes locked on me. You promised we'd talk. Lucas lowered his gaze. I mean, I can push through the pain if I have to. If Sophia Gia is busy, she doesn't have to take me home. I looked at Lucas. I'll take you home first. Theodore stood frozen, staring at me in disbelief. The light in his eyes dimmed, little by little. On the drive, Lucas spoke up. Sophia, yeah. I was the one who threw the first punch. I glanced at him. He smiled a little. I just thought he deserved a taste of what it feels like to not be trusted. I sighed. I get it. Then I flicked a finger lightly against his bruised face. But don't use this kind of method again. That face is too pretty to mess up. Lucas blinked, surprised. Then, he grinned so widely his eyes curved. All right. By the time I returned, the sky was already dark. Theodore was still standing there, alone in the dimly lit street. For a moment, he looked like an abandoned animal, but Theodore had never been mine to abandon. I met his gaze. You've caused enough of a scene. Say whatever you need to say and be done with it. Theodore was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. I didn't start the fight today. I hadn't expected him to still be fixated on that. That doesn't matter. Just get to the point. It matters. Theodore insisted, his voice laced with something unyielding. His gaze bore into mine. Sophia, you never used to take sides like this. That word, used to. It felt so distant. A lot of time has passed. Theodore, people change. And right now, to me, I met his eyes, speaking each word clearly. Lucas isn't someone else. You are. The night air was cold. Theodore stood in stunned silence before repeating the word under his breath, as if tasting it on his tongue. Someone else. He let out a low laugh, looking away. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. The days before your birthday, after school. Yes, I was with Rowena. She kept looking for me, saying she wanted to apologize to you. I knew you didn't want to see her. That's why I never told you. Then, on your birthday, she said she had bought you a present. She said she had invited people to witness her apology. That's why I helped her. His voice quieted. All these years, I never had anything with Rowena. When he finished, he finally lifted his gaze back to me. In the reflection of his eyes, I could see myself. He waited, holding his breath, as if my response meant everything. I tightened my coat. Okay, I understand. That's it? His breath hitched. You're done explaining, right? I adjusted my scarf. Then go home. It's cold out. Theodore's eyes reddened instantly. So after disappearing for all these years, his voice wavered. You really don't have anything to say to me? It was almost funny. Everything Theodore was asking now, I had already asked myself, over and over, after I transferred schools. Why had someone like Theodore, who had always been on my side, suddenly turned toward a girl he had barely known? I never found an answer, and because of that, I never forgot him. I cried myself to sleep so many times because of him. For years, Theodore's presence lingered in every corner of my life, refusing to fade. And now, after finally letting go, this was when he gave me a weak, meaningless explanation. I exhaled softly. No, no, I have nothing to say. Theodore. I looked at him, my voice steady. Let's end this here. I don't want to do this anymore. Theodore took 2 quick steps forward and pulled me into his arms. His arms tightened, his voice trembling in my ear. I don't want to end this. Sophia. I looked for you for so long after you left. I didn't know the rain would be that bad that night. All these years. I keep thinking, if only I hadn't let you pick up the cake. If only I hadn't agreed to Rowena's request. But you left so quickly. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. I laughed softly. Did I not give you a chance, Theodore? Every single time. You chose Rowena. Yes. Maybe they were just small things. But Theodore, you've always been smart. You really couldn't tell when she was lying? His breath hitched. From now on, it won't happen again. I swear. His voice cracked. Don't run from me anymore. I ran through so many cities looking for you back then, but no matter how hard I tried, I never found you. Something cold landed on my shoulder. I realized Theodore was crying. I had never imagined seeing him like this. Theodore had always been confident, untouchable. No matter what trouble I got into, he was always there, effortlessly fixing everything. Back then, I never even considered the possibility of losing him, but reality had taught me, relying too much on one person will only lead to a brutal fall, and I had fallen. Hard. It took me years to heal. I slowly pushed him away, with a quiet voice. I said, "This is the end, Theodore. Don't look for me again." Theodore's entire face was pale, his eyes were rimmed red, his throat dry, unable to form words. I turned around and walked away. Behind me, I heard his voice, low, broken, laced with pain. I can't. Chapter 10. The black Bentley no longer appeared near the company, but every morning, a florist would arrive at the office with fresh flowers. Sophia. These flowers are freshly picked. Wishing you a wonderful day. At lunchtime, someone would always deliver an expensive meal. Nicole leaned in, whispering, "Wait, isn't this from our favorite restaurant? The insanely pricey one?" The delivery staff smiled. "Miss Sophia is a top-tier VIP at our restaurant. If there's anything she ever wants, she just needs to let us know." It wasn't just this restaurant. Every single place I had ever frequented had suddenly upgraded me to VIP status, all under my name. Even the mortgage on my apartment had somehow been paid off. Every single detail, every act of generosity, it didn't take much guessing to figure out who was behind it. Nicole stared at me, wide-eyed. Theodore is insanely rich. I had tried countless times to return the money. Each time, Theodore refused. He told me, "Think of it as compensation for the past." I saw Theodore again at the company camping retreat. Our boss had said there would be a rare meteor shower that night. Apparently, our location offered the best view. On the drive there, Nicole and Lucas chattered nonstop, making my ears ache. By the time we arrived, I was relieved to finally get some peace. But of course, that was when I saw Theodore. He stood not far away, hands in his pockets, letting the wind tousle his hair. His expression was cool, distant, just like before. Theodore with red, tear-stained eyes felt like nothing more than a dream. He glanced over, met my gaze, and smiled. What a coincidence. Lucas, who was grilling skewers, let out a sharp scoff. "Nice joke, CEO Sue. Your main office is nowhere near here." Theodore nodded. "True, but I have a branch here." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Since when?" Theodore responded naturally. "Just now." Lucas rolled his eyes. "You're insane." But Theodore wasn't kidding. His new branch office was, in fact, opening here. Still, his excuse about bringing employees on a company retreat was highly questionable. Among the employees, I spotted Rowena. She wasn't as bold as before. She watched Theodore closely but didn't run to him like last time. Theodore walked over, casually striking up a conversation with my boss. I knew my boss had always wanted to collaborate with Theodore's company. So, of course, he welcomed him enthusiastically. At some point, the discussion turned to supplies. Theodore had brought twice as many resources as we had. He smoothly suggested, Why don't we all combine? It'll be more fun that way. My boss happily agreed. Lucas let out a cold laugh. Shameless. He's obviously just here for Sophia Gia. My boss smacked him on the head. You think I don't see that? But free stuff is free stuff. Lucas burned my boss's skewer before handing it to him. So you just sold her out? My boss sighed. Haven't you noticed? Your Sophia Gia already let it go. The atmosphere grew livelier as the two companies mingled. But no matter what I did, Theodore always found an excuse to help. At one point, he took the skewer from my hands, the oil sizzling over the fire. Then, he casually asked, "How have you been?" "Everything's been great." "That's good." I could feel Rowena's gaze burning into me, and soon enough, she found a reason to come over. I thought, maybe she's changed. But then, as if history was repeating itself, a bowl of hot soup tipped over, scalding her hand. A sharp scream filled the air. People from both companies turned, staring. The situation had completely shifted. Rowena had clearly hoped to frame me again. 7 years ago, it had worked. Back then, I had never truly belonged in Class 3. But this time? Before I even opened my mouth, Nicole and Lucas had already rushed in. "Are you serious right now?" Nicole snapped. "At least check your surroundings before pulling the stunt." Lucas scoffed. "This is our company's retreat. Who do you think you're messing with? And let's be real, even if Sophia had done it, you deserved it." The room exploded with overlapping voices. Things were not going the way Rowena had hoped. She stood there, frozen, her planned words stuck in her throat. Her face was flushed red with humiliation. She turned to her own company, hoping for support, but she was blocked by Theodore. His voice was icy cold. "Rowena, when we return to the company, submit your resignation. Find a job in another city." Silence fell. No one, not a single person, spoke up for her. Rowena's face drained of all color. I grabbed a bottle of cold water, and without hesitation, I dumped it over her head. A loud splash echoed as the water drenched her completely. Rowena shuddered violently. She looked up, shocked, staring at me in disbelief. I smiled at her. "This time, I really did it. You've been dying to be drenched by me, haven't you? So I figured I'd finally grant your wish." Chapter 11. We spent the entire night in the cold wind, but the meteor shower never appeared. While going to grab my scarf, the darkness around me was too deep. I misstepped and twisted my ankle. Pain shot through me instantly. I sat on the ground, a sharp sting spreading up my leg. Somewhere in the crowd, I heard hurried footsteps. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already on Theodore's back. The mountain path wasn't accessible by car. Without hesitation, Theodore carried me down himself. The night air was freezing, yet sweat beaded along his forehead. He moved quickly, step after step, but kept his movements steady, careful not to jostle me too much. The entire way down, he kept asking if I was in pain. His voice, it sounded just like that night in the rain. Urgent, helpless. For a moment, it overlapped with the Theodore from our childhood, making me feel momentarily dazed. I said, "It's not that bad." But in truth, it hurt like hell. I closed my eyes, not wanting to talk much. To distract me, Theodore kept talking. He told me so many things, stories from when we were younger. Things I knew, things I didn't. Then, he asked, "Do you remember that bracelet? The one I gave you before your birthday?" I had always wondered, how had Theodore even known I liked it? He chuckled softly. "I noticed the first time you looked at it. I had it prepared for a long time. That bracelet. I still have it, kept safely in my drawer." A lump formed in my throat. I slowly opened my eyes, staring at the dark road ahead. But I didn't say anything. Then Theodore spoke again. "The night of your birthday, when you ran into the rain, I was about to chase after you. But right then, I got a call. There was an emergency at home. I had to rush back." Those next few days were a mess. I was so overwhelmed that I barely had time to think. But as soon as things settled, I planned to come find you. No matter what you said, I wouldn't have let you stay mad at me. But when I finally had time to look for you, you were gone. You had blocked my number. All of your contacts, gone. At first, I thought you were just angry, so I bought a cake and waited in front of your house for a whole day and night. The cake melted into an unrecognizable mess, but the door never opened. Then one day, I saw someone come to school to handle your transfer paperwork. Theodore's voice trembled slightly. In that moment, I knew something was really, really wrong. He ran out of class, begged my aunt to tell him where I had gone, but she never did. Theodore let out a small, breathless laugh, part frustration, part regret. You left without a single word, not even a goodbye. I lowered my eyes. I didn't know what to say, so I changed the subject. Theodore, stop upgrading all my memberships, and don't pay off my loans anymore. I'll handle those myself. He suddenly stopped walking. His fingers tightened slightly. His voice was hoarse. Do you really want to cut all ties with me that badly? I answered simply. I don't want to owe anyone anything. 4 years. You took care of me so much. Let's just call it even. Theodore shook his head. No. He started walking again. The cold wind whistled in my ears. Even Theodore's fingertips were shaking. Maybe it was just the pain in my foot, but a strange ache spread through my chest. After a while, I spoke again. In a little while, I'll be leaving this city. I'm getting transferred to a branch office as a director. Theodore's entire body froze. The wind was too cold. He took a deep breath. His voice suddenly raspy. You're leaving again? I gave a quiet, After that, Theodore didn't say another word. He just kept walking. Theodore took me to the hospital. He stayed the entire time, handling everything himself. The hospital room was silent, except for the sound of breathing. Theodore sat by the bed, unmoving, his eyes locked onto me, as if he was memorizing my face. After a long, long time, he finally spoke, with a smile that looked more painful than anything else. When will you come back? The smile was terrible. I hesitated for a second before saying, who knows? If things go well, maybe I'll never come back. Theodore swallowed, his Adam's apple moving up and down. The deepest sadness filled his eyes. Then will I ever see you again? I buried my head under the blanket, and softly, I shook my head. Probably not. The light in Theodore's eyes completely died. He lowered his gaze, and after a long, long pause, from his throat, a barely audible whisper escaped. Okay. Chapter 12. The day I left the city. It snowed. The air carried a bone-chilling cold. I knew Theodore was behind me, not too far away, watching, waiting, but he never stepped forward. Dependence is a dangerous thing. I had fallen once, hard enough to bleed. When I chose to leave back then, I had never intended to come back and pretend everything was fine. Broken glass doesn't piece itself back together. Fairy tale reconciliations were nothing but lies, and I would never, never throw myself back into that storm again. I tightened my grip on my suitcase, and I walked forward, step by step, without ever looking back.